Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. We're working today in Jeremiah chapter 6, looking at verse 7. In verse 6, the previous verse, the Lord has announced to his people the reasons why he's bringing the Babylonians against them, to chasten them, to punish them. It's because of all the oppression that he has seen among his people who were supposed to be a light to the world, were living in such ungodly ways. And in verse 7, he's going to continue that description of what he is seeing as he looks down upon the people. Got a couple difficulties in this verse right at the beginning, but the rest of it's not too bad. Let's go ahead and read it in Hebrew as we get started. Ke hakir bayir memecha ken hekera ra'ata hamas veshod yishama ba al panai Tamid, Choli, Umaka. We start with our little preposition, like or as, and then hakir. Now this is one of the difficulties we have. So as we have this, we have an infinitive construct, and it's a hifil. You got this ha at the beginning, you can see I there. Now, what's the root of this? And this is one of the interesting questions we have. It's perhaps from the verb karar, which we would only find twice, actually both times in this verse, because we're going to see it a little bit later over here, same verb. And this means probably to keep cold or fresh. It's related to nouns and adjectives having to do with cold or coldness, something like that. And so this might mean to keep as the keeping fresh we're going to see what we're going to have as we go further on, and having to do with waters over here. The other possibility, though, is this might actually be the same thing in hifil infinitive construct from the verb kur, which would be a hollow verb written like that, which means to dig. And in the cow, and the hifil would be to dig, usually in the context of digging a well. So the hifil would be to be digging a well with the result of having waters pour forth or burst forth. So actually getting water to come up out of a well. And that's a possibility as well. And you're going to see that reflected in some of the translations. So let's just keep that for now. Let's go on to the next word. Now you noticed I don't have any vowel points here, and I read this as bayir because we do have a Kere reading, which reads this as bayir, like this. Now, actually probably pronounced something like this, bayir. And the Masoretes, as putting this Kere reading in there, said this is basically the equivalent of Be'er, which you're familiar with, the well, like Beersheba, the 7 wells, or the well of oath, something like that. As it stands written here, you could point it as Bor, and that's a slightly different word. Now, Bor, we used to seeing as the word for a pit or a cistern. Be'er meaning a well. When you see the two ideas are related, some sort of a hole in the ground. Bo is usually masculine, and as we're going to see here, we're going to have Mayima, which is her waters. So if we were to try and pull this sentence together, let's take it under keeping cool for the time being. As the keeping cool, a well, Be'er, her waters. As a well keeps her waters cool. This is mayim, plural of waters with a suffix. This 3fs suffix, be'er, is feminine, so her waters, so that fits kind of well. Bor, as a cistern, is usually masculine, so we'd have a little problem right there. But Hebrew tends to flex a little bit, so it's not always too rigid. The Masoretes probably felt that this means well rather than cistern, and keeping cool, keeping fresh over here for the verb, or perhaps causing the waters to burst forth from the well. So we're going to see in our translations a couple variations. But let's take it thus far as the keeping fresh, as a well keeps her waters fresh, thus she has kept fresh. Now here we have a perfect. It's going to be a 3fs with this ending on it right here. It's a hifil again from the same verb, either this verb karar or this verb kur. and they should obviously probably be translated consistently, whichever way you choose to translate it, and you'll see it in the examples I'll give you in just a little bit. Thus, she has kept fresh. Now, who's the she here? Well, in this case here, it's referring back to the city of Jerusalem, the daughter of Zion, the people. In other words, she has kept fresh her evil. This is the word ra'ah, usually with a hey here instead of the tau, but we have the suffix, which is a 3fs suffix, referring back again to the daughter of Jerusalem, to the people, to the city. She has kept her evil fresh, not in a good way, in a very bad way. In other words, her evil is always being renewed in a negative way. What else does the Lord see? He sees violence, Hamas, and then destruction, Shod. Violence and destruction, well, he doesn't see them, yet they are actually heard. This is an imperfect, being used almost in a present sense, because this is what is continually being heard there. It's a 3ms cal from the verb shama, but, I'm sorry, this is not a cal. We need to go back over there. It's a nifal. There we go, because we have this comments here. There's the dagash of your nifal right there, and your hirik. So is heard. It's not he hears, but is heard. Now, you notice this is a compound subject, so we would expect perhaps a plural over here, but these two ideas are taken together in this unity here. So violence and destruction, these two are very frequently found together. Violence and destruction, that's what is heard in the nifal passive sense, is heard in her, in the city of Jerusalem. And upon my face, literally, upon my face, or before me, continually, there's our adverb. What does the Lord have upon his face continually as he looks at his people, his city? Choli, that's a kametz hatuf, composite schwa here. Sickness and blows or wounds. This is actually a singular, but probably in a collective way from the verb nakah, to smite. Sickness and blow or wound, but again in a collective way. This is probably the results of what the people are doing to one another, as some are oppressing others in the city. So there's creating sickness and wounds. Sometimes these words are used for the discipline, the wounds that God inflicts upon his people in a disciplinary way. But in this context, it probably refers to what the Lord sees as people mistreat one another in the city. So this part here is pretty straightforward. This part here is a little bit tricky. So let's go ahead and hide our work, and we'll take a look at a couple of translations as we go through here. First of all, in the ESV, as a well, so they're taking this in terms of the Kere reading here, as a well keeps its water fresh, keeping fresh, so she keeps fresh her evil. So this is a good thing over here, but it's not a good thing once you get over to keeping your evil fresh. Violence and destruction are heard within her. There's that passive idea. That's what is heard. Sickness and wounds, even though collective sense, are ever before me, literally on my face. And then you'll see a little bit of difference with the NIV. As a well pours out its water. So they're taking, the ESV took this in the sense of karar, to keep fresh. The NIV seems to take it in the sense of the other verb, kur, meaning to dig a well and cause its water to gush forth. As a well pours out its water, so she pours out her wickedness. Both of them do make sense in the context, and maybe there's a common idea that you could kind of unifies the two of them, brings them together, but slight differences here, but they're getting at the same result. Violence and destruction resound in her. Her sickness, you don't have her, but it's obviously very clear in the context, and wounds are ever before me. This is what the Lord is observing as he looks down on his people. It's not what he wanted. They were called to be a light to the nations, to show forth God's character, and they have fallen far from that, which explains why the Lord is forced to bring his disciplining hand against them. Wow. Well, check back with us soon as we continue working through Jeremiah chapter 6 in the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.